Good morning out there in, can we call this TV land? Yeah, we can call this TV land. What is a TV really? Something that shows. Internet land or whatever y'all want to be called. Still jamming our instrumental Christian music. I love me some Christian music, as those of you who know me already know. But good to be back with you this morning. I'm going to be talking about another tough subject this morning. Tough by way of application. You know, a lot of subjects, at least for me, I don't know about for other Bible class teachers, ministers, or whatever category you fall in, but a lot of subjects are not complicated when it comes to teaching them, when it comes to trying to get people to see, God's viewpoint. The difficult part with a lot of these subjects is applying them, making an application to your life. I mean, even for me, some of the lessons that I learned from studying the Bible, and I know applying them, even for me, a lot of times is difficult. And one of those subjects is the one like we're talking about this morning, and it is the subject of how to stop worrying. Now, I can answer that question with one sentence by saying you can't. It's impossible to stop worrying. But I'm not. I want to go into some detail and kind of offer some practical suggestions that may help and may not help. It depends. I found an article online. It's kind of lengthy, but I think it's worthwhile. It was written by a lady named Denise Mann, and it comes from a website, helpguide.org. And the way this lady wrote her article, to me, is a very practical way, a practical approach to the idea of trying to stop worrying. And I think she did a pretty good job. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to read her article, talk about it a little bit, and then make some biblical applications when necessary. Worrying is not something that's foreign to the Bible. To start off with, if we just read Philippians chapter 4 and verse number 6, the Apostle Paul says, "Be anxious for nothing." Some translations have worry about nothing. Be anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplications make your with prayer and supplications with thanksgiving let your requests be made known to God. So why would Paul say be anxious for nothing if he did not believe that there was a problem with people being anxious? Well, he said that because there is a problem. We are anxious many times. We do worry a lot of times. Also, Peter in 1 Peter 5 and verse number 7 says, "Cast all your care upon him, for he cares for you." Why would we need to cast our care upon God if we don't have any cares? So Peter understood the reality that in the life of a child of God, there would be those cares. There would be those things that are on our minds that we cannot, it's difficult to get rid of. Also in Matthew chapter 6, Jesus speaking here says in verse number 25, "Therefore I say to you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat, what you will drink, nor about your body, what you will put on it. Is not life more than food, and the body more than clothing?" And so in this verse here, Jesus acknowledges the fact that we worry and that there are times in our life where we have cares and we're anxious about things. And so the concept of worrying is not foreign to the scriptures. And I think many people understand that. Many Christians understand that. The problem is, how do we stop? How do we stop being so anxious? How do we stop carrying all of these cares around upon our shoulders? How do we get to the point to where we don't worry constantly all day long about things that we face in life? And that's what I'm going to be trying to help answer this morning. Okay, so I'm going to start off by reading this article right here. And the title of the article is How to Stop Worrying, Self-Help Strategies for Anxiety Relief. She starts off by saying this: worrying can be helpful when it spurs you to take action and solve a problem. But if you're preoccupied with what ifs and worst case scenarios, worry can become its own problem. Unrelenting doubts and fears can be paralyzing. They can sap your emotional energy, send your anxiety levels soaring, and interfere with your daily life. But chronic worrying is a mental habit that can be broken. You can train your brain to stay calm and to look at life from a more balanced and less fearful perspective. So, in this first paragraph right here, she starts off by giving us an overview of what she's going to talk about, and she comes to the same conclusion I came to, and that is you can't stop worrying. She says you can train your brain to stay calm and look at life from a more balanced and less fearful perspective, and that's the goal. When it comes to worrying, the goal is not to figure out how to completely stop worrying, but to harness those emotions in a more productive way, a healthy way, and that's what we're going to try to do this morning. She says, why is it so hard to stop worrying? Okay. No one likes the constant way worrying makes you feel. Got a phone call there. So why is it so difficult? Let me just read that sentence again. No one likes the way constant worrying makes you feel. So why is it so difficult to stop? The answer lies in the beliefs, both negative and positive, you have about worrying. On the negative side, you may believe that your constant worrying is going to spiral completely out of control, drive you crazy, or damage your health. On the positive side, you may believe that worrying helps you avoid bad things, prepare for the worst, or come up with solutions. You may even believe that worrying shows you're a caring and conscientious person. Negative beliefs or worrying about worrying add to your anxiety and keep it going. But positive beliefs about worrying can be even more damaging. It's tough to break the worry habit if you believe that worrying protects you. I think that is a very important point, and I'll explain why in just a minute. In order to stop worry and anxiety for good, you must give up your belief that worrying serves a positive purpose. That's why many of us worry as much as we do. We believe that there are benefits to worrying, and we're going to talk about some of those benefits in just a minute. Okay. Once you realize you're hold up just a minute. I am missing. I'm missing a page here. I know something didn't sound right. You know what I did? Threw it in the garbage. Yep. I threw it in the garbage, y'all. All right, I got it now. Okay, so let's continue. Once you realize that worrying is the problem, not the solution, then you can regain control of the worried mind. Now listen to this. Why you keep worrying? You have mixed feelings about your worries. On one hand, your worries are bothering you. You can't sleep. You can't get these pessimistic thoughts out of your head. But there's a way that these worries make sense to you. Now, here's why it's hard for many of us to stop worrying. We try to convince ourselves that worrying makes sense to us, that it protects us. And here's how. We begin to think while we're worrying that maybe in my worrying, I'll find a solution. Worrying helps us to feel like that we're not overlooking anything. We say, if I keep thinking about it a little longer, then maybe I'll figure it out. We worry because we don't want to be surprised, and we feel like the more and more we think about the situation and linger on the situation, then we won't be caught off guard for by some unexpected thing that could arise out of the situation. And sometimes we feel like that we're being responsible because we're sitting around worrying about it. We convince ourselves that this shows us that we really, really care. And so we worry because we have built up this this figure in our mind that worrying is a good thing. Okay, because not to worry shows I don't care. That's what we tell ourselves. Not to worry shows I'm not concerned about the situation. And so we've convinced ourselves that worrying is a good thing. Okay, she goes on to say, you have a hard time giving up on your worries because in a sense your worries have been working for you. And that's what we've got to change. We have got to change how we look at worrying. We've got to stop convincing ourselves that worrying is something that's working for us, that worrying is shielding us, that worrying is protecting us, that worrying is making us feel like that we're responsible, that we care, and so forth and so on. Because as long as we have those attitudes about worrying, then it's going to be difficult to stop. It's difficult to let go of something that you believe is protecting you. Okay, so now she goes into the tips that can help us stop worrying so much. Tip number 1, she says, create a worry period. Create a worry period. Notice she didn't say get rid of it. She said create a special time for worrying. It's tough to be productive in your life when anxiety and worry are dominating your thoughts. So what can you do? Telling yourself to stop worrying doesn't work. At least not for long. You can distract yourself for a moment, but you can't banish anxious thoughts for good. In fact, trying to do so often makes them stronger and more persistent. You can test this out for yourself. Close your eyes and picture a pink elephant. Once you can see it in your mind, stop thinking about it. Whatever you do for the next 6 seconds, don't think about the pink elephant. How did you do, she says. Do thoughts of pink elephants keep popping into your brain? Why trying to stop anxious thought does not work? She says trying to stop anxious thoughts is like temporary putting a Band-Aid over a cut. You may cover it up for a minute, but the cut is still there, and as soon as you take the Band-Aid off, you will see the scar. You will see the residue of the cut. It's still there. So it's difficult to completely get rid of a cut, all right? And worrying is like a cut. We can't completely get rid of it, but we can create a time to where we suppress it. We can create a time to where we isolate it. That way we can function. Why do we put a Band-Aid over a cut? Why do we doctor it up? Why do we put medicine on it, so forth? So we can carry on with our lives. We don't want to become infected. We can't completely get rid of the cut, but we can maintain the cut in such a way to where it allows us to carry on with our lives. That's the way we've got to look at worrying. We've got to look at worrying as a cut that just simply needs to be fixed up enough so that we can function in our lives. Okay. Thought stopping backfires because it forces you to pay extra attention to the very thought you want to avoid. You're always having to be watchful for it. And this very emphasis makes it seem even more important. Think about this for a minute. When you're trying to suppress your worrying by getting rid of the worry, you go all day long trying to suppress it. You go all day long thinking about it. You know, whatever you're worried about, you're saying, okay, I don't need to think about this. I don't need. Why? While in the midst of telling yourself you don't need to think about it, you're thinking about it. So trying to get rid of whatever you're worrying about from your brain causes you to spend more time thinking about what's in your brain. It's difficult to do. It's very difficult to do. And some people say that, well, just find you something extracurricular, some activity or something to take your mind off of it. And that's all well and good, but everybody's not strong enough to even do that because many times the things that we're worrying about affect us in our extracurricular activity. They affect us on our jobs. They affect us in our relationships or whatever it is that's happening to us or whatever we have going on. You always, the next paragraph she says, but that doesn't mean there's nothing that you can do to control your worry. You just need a different approach. This is where the strategy of postponing your worrying comes in. Rather than trying to stop or get rid of your anxious thought, give yourself permission to have it, but put off dwelling on it till later. Okay? She suggests creating a worry period by postponing your worrying. And when whatever that worry period is, let's say for instance, you get a piece of paper, and this is what you do. You get a piece of paper out and you write down whatever it is you're worrying about. And when you write it down, you write down, okay, I'm going to worry about this tonight from 6 to 6:30 p.m. And when you worry about it, and you put that piece of paper on the table or somewhere on your dresser or in an envelope, and you lay it down, and you don't come back to it until 6 o'clock. Once you come back to that worry letter that you've given yourself permission to have, you take that worry letter and you go into a room somewhere by yourself and you pull that letter out, and then you write down everything that you're worried about. Okay? She says here, make a brief note of the things that you're worrying about. Go over the list. She calls it the worry list. If the thoughts you wrote down are still bothering you, allow yourself to worry about them, but only for the amount of time you specify for your worry period. If they don't seem important anymore, cut your worry period short and enjoy the rest of your day. So you give yourself time. You write down all the things you're worried about, and then when 6 o'clock comes, you worry about those things, you pray about those things, you meditate on those things for that period of time. And once you do, you fold it back up, put it in the envelope, and put it back in the drawer, and you leave it until the next day. You're not getting rid of your worry, but you're allowing yourself to worry, and you're also allowing yourself to take control of how and when you worry. And that's important. Postponing worrying is effective because it breaks the habit of dwelling on worries when you've got other things to do. Yet there's no struggle to suppress the thought or to judge it. You simply save it for later. And as you develop the ability to postpone your anxious thoughts, you'll start to realize that you have more control than you think. And so this is very important. You get a piece of paper, do exactly like I'm telling you, get a piece of paper, write down your worry period, your time that you're going to give yourself and what you're going to be worried about. And then you come back at that time every day, if need be, and you worry about those things. This reminds me of Jesus in Luke chapter 22. Many times in Jesus' life, when he had stuff on his mind, he had a worry period, if you want to call it that, but he had a time that he went away and prayed about things. In Luke chapter 22, in verse number 40, it says, when he had came to the place, he said to them, pray that you may not enter into temptation. And when he was withdrawn away from them a stone's throw, he knelt down and prayed, saying, Father, if it is your will, take this cup away from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but your will be done. Then an angel appeared to him from heaven, strengthening him, and being in agony, he prayed the more earnestly. Then his sweat became like drops of blood falling down to the ground, and he arose up from his prayer. Jesus took the opportunity to slip away by himself, talk to his Father, pray about the situation, and he was in agony. He gave himself time, permission to deal with his anxiety. He gave himself time and permission to deal with the things that he was facing in life. And that's what you've got to do too. You've got to give yourself permission to do it. And when you do that, you take control of your thoughts, and your thoughts don't take control of you. Number 2, ask yourself, is the problem solvable? This is very important. Research shows that while you're worrying, you temporarily feel less anxious. Running over the problem in your head distracts you from from your emotions and make you feel like you're getting something accomplished. But worrying and problem solving are two different things. You hear what she says there? She says running over the problem in your head distracts you from your emotions and makes you feel like you're getting something accomplished when actually you're not. Once again, that's what we've done. We've created in our mind the fact that worrying helps us. The fact that worrying is a protection mechanism in our lives that protects us from the realities all around us. Okay? It's superficial. It's something that we have created, some false notion about worrying that is beneficial to us when actually it's not beneficial. But as she said, worrying and problem solving are two totally different things. Problem solving involves evaluating the situation, coming up with concrete steps for dealing with it, and then putting the plan into action. Worrying, on the other hand, rarely leads to solutions. No matter how much time you spend dwelling on a worst case scenario, you're no more prepared to deal with them than they actually deal with them should they actually happen. Okay, so she says distinguish between solvable and unsolvable worries. If worry pops into your head, start by asking yourself whether the problem is something you can actually solve. The following questions can help. Okay, is the problem something you're currently facing, rather than an imagery of what if? How many times have we worried and destroyed our day because we're thinking of the possibilities of something that something could happen, the what ifs? Okay, we cannot solve the what ifs. What ifs are unsolvable problems. Number two, she says, if the problem is an imagery, what if, how likely is it to happen? Is your concern realistic? Even if you're worrying about something that's a what if, is it likely to happen, or are you over exaggerating it? Number three, can you do something about the problem or prepare for it, or is it out of your control? Okay. Productive, solvable worries are those you can take action on right now. For instance, if you're worried about your bills, you could call your creditors to see about flexible payment options. Unproductive, unsolvable worries are those for which there is no corresponding action. What if I get cancer? What if I get cancer someday? Or what if my kid gets into an accident? If the worry is solvable, start brainstorming about it. Make a list of all the possible solutions you can think of. Try not to get hung up on finding the perfect solution. Focus on things that you have the power to change rather than circumstances or realities beyond your control. After you evaluated your options, make a plan of action. Once you have a plan, start doing something about the problem, and you'll feel less worried. Now she goes into dealing with unsolvable problems. But what if the worry isn't something you can solve? If you're a chronic worrier, the vast majority of your anxious thoughts probably fall into this camp. In such cases, it's important to tune into your emotions. As previously mentioned, I cannot talk this morning for some reason. Maybe I need some sweet tea here, since I'm off my diet. As previously mentioned, worrying helps you avoid unpleasant emotions. Worrying keeps you in your head, thinking about how to solve problems rather than allowing yourself to feel the underlying emotions. But you can't worry your emotions away. While you're worrying, your feelings are temporarily suppressed. But as soon as you stop, they bounce back. And then you start worrying about your feelings. What's wrong with me? I shouldn't feel this way. The only way out of this vicious cycle is by learning to embrace your feelings. This may seem scary at first because of negative beliefs you have about emotion. For example, you may believe that you should always be rational and in control, that your feelings should always make sense, or that you shouldn't feel certain emotions such as fear or anger. The truth is that emotions, like life, are messy. They don't always make sense, and they're not always pleasant. But as long as you can accept your feelings as a part of being human, you'll be able to experience them without becoming overwhelmed and learn how to use them to your advantage. I think that's a very important paragraph right there. Learning to accept your emotions. It's okay to be afraid. It's okay to be scared. It's okay to have fear about the unknown. Those things are fine. They are part of who we are as human beings. We've got to accept that. We've got to embrace that. When we start trying to suppress those types of things, and we're trying to suppress the very nature that we have within us. There's nothing wrong about that. The Bible describes God sometimes as having tears. We even read on one occasion where Jesus wept over his friend Lazarus. So, the idea of having emotions, is nothing wrong with that. Embrace those emotions. It's okay. It's okay to cry when we worry. Crying when we worry, having fear about the unknown, those things don't mean that we're abnormal. Those things don't mean that we've lost trust and faith and confidence in God. They don't mean that at all. They just simply means we're human. And it's okay sometimes, as a matter of fact, it may be good sometimes to release those things so that we can begin the healing process in whatever we're going through. Okay. She says next, accept the uncertainty. The inability to tolerate uncertainty plays a huge role in anxiety and worry. Chronic worriers can't stand doubt and unpredictability. Chronic worriers. They need to know with 100% certainty what's going on. Have you ever think about that? Why do you worry a lot of times? Do you worry a lot of times because you don't know 100% everything that needs to be known about the situation? Yes. Yes. Worrying is seen as a way to predict what the future has in store, a way to prevent unpleasant surprises and control the outcome. The problem is it doesn't work. Thinking about all the things that could go wrong doesn't make life any more predictable. You may feel safer when you're worrying, but it's just an illusion. Focusing on worst case scenarios won't keep bad things from happening. Let me stop right there. Focusing on worst case scenarios won't keep bad things from happening. Let me pull this over into the realm of a Christian. We may from time to time think that worrying constantly about a problem makes God move faster. We may be fooled to believe that the more we worry about something, the more God pays attention to us. The more we show that our heart is broken, the more God looks at us, and the more helpless we are seen in his eyesight. Therefore, that makes him act a lot quicker on our behalf. No. It doesn't work like that. It doesn't work like that at all. Jesus was in the garden. Jesus was in agony. Jesus was anxious. His sweat became like drops of blood, yet his Father left him in that situation to face what he needed to face. It just gave him strength. Look what Job went through. Job went through everything that he went through, even in his tears. He was still going through it. God didn't come down and pat him on his shoulder and say, it's okay, let me take you out of it. But God was with him. So we can't convince ourselves that the more we worry about something, the more God pays attention to us. God is not going to pay any more attention to us whether we're worrying or whether we're not worrying. God pays the same amount of attention to you based upon how you're living your life. If you're living your life for him, he's paying attention to you. If you're not living your life for him, he's not paying attention to you in the sense of being there for you. Okay? So our tears and us worrying about those things, they don't make God act any differently than he would if we were not worrying about those things. She goes on to say, doing that will only keep you from enjoying the good things you have at the present. So if you want to stop worrying, start by tackling your need for certainty and immediate answers. Accepting uncertainty, the key to anxiety to relief. To understand the problem of refusing to accept uncertainty, ask yourself the following 4 questions and write down your response. Number 1, is it possible to be certain about everything in life? When we're worrying, we want to be certain. We want to know the outcome. But really, is it possible to be certain about everything in life? Number 2, what are the advantages of requiring certainty versus the disadvantages? Or how is needing certainty in life helpful or unhelpful? Number 3, do you tend to predict bad things will happen just because they are uncertain? Is this a reasonable thing to do? What is the likelihood of positive or neutral outcomes? Number 4, is it possible to live with the small chance that some negative thing may happen, given its likelihood is very low? How many times we have held ourselves shackled and imprisoned, worrying about something that we thought was or could happen, and it actually turned out opposite from what we thought. Tip number 4, we've got to challenge our anxious thoughts. If you suffer from chronic anxiety and worries, chances are you look at the world in ways that make it seem more dangerous than it really is. For example, you may overestimate the possibility that things will turn out badly, jump immediately into worst case scenarios, or treat every negative thought as if it was fact. I think that's a real problem too. We surmise and we come to these conclusions a lot of times by assumptions, and the conclusions that we come to by assumptions that are not based upon fact, we make them fact. And because we make them fact in our mind, we begin then to respond to the situation as reality. When the situation is not reality at all, we made it a reality in our mind by formulating our own false conclusions. And this affects us greatly. And we all do it. We all do it. It's not something that's isolated to any one or two people. We all find ourselves in situations like that from time to time. You may also discredit your own ability to handle life's problems, assuming you'll fall apart at the first sign of trouble. These irrational, pessimistic attitudes are known as cognitive disorders. Although cognitive distortions aren't based on reality, they're not easy to give up. Often they're part of a lifelong pattern of thinking that becomes so automatic you're not even completely aware of it. In order to break these bad thinking habits and stop the worry and anxiety they bring, you must retrain your brain. That too is a very important point. If you have lived your life in such a way, or you've been trained in such a way, either by the environment that you were in, either by seeing your parents operate that way, or being around friends, or just something that you kind of adapted to for whatever reason throughout your childhood life, and it becomes a part of who you are as a person. Retraining your brain to think differently is important, and it's a process. It's not something that happens overnight. All of these steps that we're talking about today are going to be things that you must put into play on a regular basis in order to recreate a new habit. Because the current habit or the way of thinking that you may have now, or that I may have now, wasn't created overnight. Therefore, it's not going to be erased overnight. Habits are formed over time, and habits are formed based upon us forcing ourselves to do something over and over and over and over again. And just like over time we forced ourselves to have negative perspectives about life and negative outlooks upon situations and cause ourselves to worry about those things, we got to retrain our brain to look at it differently and formulate a new habit. It takes time for that, but it cannot happen unless we begin a process of forcing ourselves to think differently. She says, start by identifying the frightening thought, being as detailed as possible about what scares you or what worries you. Then, instead of viewing your thoughts as facts, treat them as hypotheses you're testing out. As you examine and challenge your worries and fears, you develop a more balanced perspective. Stop worrying by questioning the anxious thoughts. What's the evidence that the thought is true? That's not true. Is there a more positive, realistic way to look at the situation? When we find ourselves worrying about something, take the opposite side and see, is there a bright light somewhere? Instead of saying, what if this happened? Turn it to a positive and say, well, what if this happens? There's always two sides to everything. And we've got to find that other thing to relieve some of the worrying in our lives. What's the probability that I'm scared of what will actually happen? If the probability is low, what are some more likely outcomes? Is the thought helpful? How will worrying about it help me, or how will it hurt me? What would I say to a friend who had this same worry? Okay. Now, I'm not going to read any further. I'm going to stop right here. She's got a lot of other good information, but I will make mention of this tip number 5, because I think this is very important. Beware of how others affect you. You know, how you feel is affected by the company that you keep. Keep a diary of your worry. Based upon the type of people you hang around, write down their names when you're in these people's company. Do you feel more positive or more negative after you left their company? If you feel more negative after you left their company, then that may be a person that you don't need to be around a lot. If you feel more positive after you left their company, then that may be a person that you need to be around a lot. You know, Paul said in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, and I know you know the quotation, but I'm a stickler for reading it from the scriptures, putting ourselves into a habit of looking into the Bible. In 1 Corinthians chapter 15 and verse number 33, Paul says, "Don't be conceived. Evil company corrupts good habits." Evil company corrupts good habits. And so you must be aware. You've got to keep a journal of the people that you are around. Okay? And the feelings that you have when you are around those people. This is going to help you get to the point of where you stop worrying so much. You got to start journaling these things. Keep a diary of it. She says, spend less time with people who make you anxious. Spend less time with people who make you worry more, and spend more time with people who make you worry less. Out of all the things that we've talked about today, I think that is so important. So important. Because the majority of our day is spent with people a lot of times. Spend less time with people who make you worry more, and spend more time with people who make you worry less. That's important. That's important. That may cut down your friends list some. That may cut down some social media activity. That may cut down some places that you go, or whatever, or whoever, or wherever it is that makes you worry more. May cut down television shows. But be around people who make you worry less. Be around those people more. That's important. There are so many things that we can probably say about it, and I'm sure other people have other people have a lot of information, just like what she wrote in her article. But maybe these are some steps that probably can help you all, help myself, when we find ourselves in situations where we constantly worry about something that we cannot change. And I'll close it out with this right here. For a Christian, knowing that we should not worry is not the issue. We know that. We know that we have no reason to worry because God is on our side. For a Christian, because we're human and we have a brain, it's hard not to. And so, kind of to sum it up, don't try to stop worrying. Try to take control of your worrying. Take control of your thoughts. Give yourself permission to worry, when to worry, and begin to direct your own thoughts, and rather than letting your thoughts direct you. If you do this, you're going to do so much for the happiness and joy that you have in your own life, and you won't spend your days worrying about things that you cannot control. And remember, things that you can control, don't worry about them anyway. Figure out what to do to change them. Things you can't control, there's no point in meditating on them all day. because they are beyond your control. Thank y'all so much for being here today. Y'all have a good rest of your Wednesday. God bless you. Be safe out there on the highway. Be safe on the byway. Be safe in the skyways. If you're on an airplane, wherever you are, be safe. May God be with you to the end of time. May He take care of you and your family. Thank you, Sarah Beth, girlfriend. I'm glad this talk this morning benefited you. It benefited me, so I know it had to benefit someone. But appreciate you, girlfriend, and everybody else who joined in. Share this with your friends who may be worrying about things. Share this video with them, and maybe it could give them some hope or some relief in their lives as they strive to stop worrying about stuff. Oh, holy night, when Christ was born. Oh, night divine. Oh, night divine. God bless you. Peace and roll tide.